Welcome to In All Honesty, the podcast where we get real about life and all the problems that come with it. I'm Michelle Elman, and I'm that friend who we all know is a little bit too honest. You might not come to me when you get back together with your ex, but I'll be there for you when it all goes tits up. Welcome back to In All Honesty, and this week we are talking about situationships. This is probably one of my most asked topics. And here's the thing, I feel like casual relationships have a bad reputation. We keep talking about how casual relationships are this trashy thing, and I just don't believe they are. What I do believe is that it's important, if you are going to be in a casual relationship, that you be on the same page. What I am against, situationships. What's the difference between a casual relationship and a situationship? In a situationship, they are motivated to keep you confused. They want you to have no answers. They want you to be uncertain, because in that uncertainty, they can create greater attachment than they are willing to follow through on. Whereas in a casual relationship, you are both on the same page. You both communicate. And I would even say that in order to do a casual relationship well, at times you need to communicate even more so than when you're in a long-term relationship. When you're in a long-term relationship, there are already predisposed rules that as a society we set for what is expected from a partner, from a husband, from even a boyfriend. Whereas I think because casual relationships are much more new and they look very different on different people, some people, even just the term itself, casual relationships, like you can say no strings attached, you could say friends with benefits, you could say pre-exclusive. All of these terms can mean different things to different people. You can be exclusive with a casual relationship in some worlds. I've never done that personally, but this is why I think forget the labels, forget the definitions, and instead it's about deciding the boundaries you have with each other, and that means having conversations about it. Anytime someone is leading you on, committing to more than they are following through on, or not giving you answers and putting you in a position where you are scared to ask for clarity, that is a situationship. And they really do benefit from leaving you in this state of confusion. They want you there. And often with a situationship as well, it's not even just the fact that they might just want sex or might just want to be a casual relationship. It's that they want you to like them more than they like you. They actually get off on the power dynamic of you being the confused party. And it could be that, one, they know they're not interested in you, but they're using you as a backup or an option. Or it could be that there is someone else they're more interested in, but keeping you around just in case that falls through. Either way, no one deserves that. And you don't want to be with the kind of person who would be okay with that kind of behavior. And if you are left in that state of confusion, end it. There is no ifs and buts about it. If you are confused, have a conversation about it. And if you leave that conversation without more clarity, then that person likely wants you to stay in that state of confusion. It is often not by accident. The reason why I say we have to destigmatize casual relationships is because this idea of stay single until it's the one you want to marry, one, creates a lot of pressure, but also the fact that I believe there's only so much you can learn from being single without interacting with people. There is a common conversation going around on social media, especially around the fact that, like, we have, especially women, become very hyper independent, live alone, working from home, not really interacting in the world. And therefore, it's this whole conversation of I've protected my peace. But have you protected your peace, or have you just pushed everyone so far away that there is no human interaction that could trigger you, hurt you, harm you? And therefore, you've actually not built up resilience. It's not really the fact that you've built this really solid core of self-esteem and mental health, but more so that you don't have enough trust in yourself to have the resilience if something goes wrong. Ultimately, every time you interact with a human, there is a risk and a potential of getting hurt. And if you aren't interacting with any humans, then yes, it might be perceived as safety, but you're also quite isolated from the world, and that's going to have negative repercussions in another way. I think for me, one of the greatest things after my breakup was the fact that a lot of my casual relationships did help me heal. And I think when you talk about that, a lot of people say it's, oh, you're just using them. that's implying that there wasn't mutual consent and that they weren't aware. And because I am dating and have always dated very transparently, people know where I'm at. People are allowed to consent to it. And also, you don't know what's going on in their life. I've shared some of the stories over the last year, including the guy who's going through terminal cancer. There was a guy who was coming out of a divorce. Other people are going through things too. And so a lot of the men I found were men where we can mutually support each other, but it wasn't one way that I was the only one who wasn't emotionally available, but also that they weren't looking for more either. And I think being self-aware about how much emotional availability you have is actually the kinder option. And I also think the term emotionally available is widely misunderstood because it's wielded as such an insult, particularly online, when actually emotional availability is not a permanent state. It is a temporary state. And so there will be times where you will be dating and you might not be emotionally available. And it is your responsibility to then either communicate that or to end the relationship you are in if the person you are looking for is looking for a relationship that involves emotions or commitment. And I think you never know when that stage in your life is going to hit either, because you could be really emotionally available and then you lose a parent and you just don't have that capacity anymore. You don't have that space anymore. And you might hit pause on your dating life. Now, if you're in a long-term relationship when that happened, it's a lot more easier to manage because no romantic relationship is ever 50-50. And in those phases and in those periods, usually the partner takes on the responsibility and the duty of care for both of you a lot more. And also the responsibility for keeping the relationship going whilst you are going through an important life phase. That partner becomes your support. And sometimes in a romantic relationship, it's about you and sometimes it's about them. And they accept that you are going through a hard time and it needs to be about you for a moment. But when you are casually dating and you are either in new situations or putting yourself out there to meet new people, it is in those moments you have to either be honest about your limited capacity or just not date. I think where it is cruel and unkind is when you are selling something you cannot live up to. And that's where this idea of leading someone on comes from. The reason why casual relationships are so stigmatized is because of this conflation between dating someone casually and a situationship. But I think situationships, again, don't happen by accident. There is one party that is very confused on purpose, and there is one party that knows the other person likes them. If you have ever dated someone where you have known that they like you more than you like them, I was in that situation last year and I communicated that. We had only gone on 2 dates, and even after the first date, I was like, hey, I just think you're getting attached a little bit too quickly and I'm not sure I have the space to provide what you're looking for. He reassured me that he was fine and that I have communicated well enough. He gets it. He gets what place I'm in. And then after the second date, I felt it get even more intense. And I was like, hey, I know you said you're good. I know you said you're fine. And I know you said like that you're okay with what this is, but it doesn't feel like it is. And I am starting to feel like it's better if we should just end it. Now, in his head, he still was saying, no, we're all good. We're all good. Like, I get it. You want something casual. But his behavior was showing that it wasn't casual. And so I had a duty of care. And this is one of the biggest components to make casual relationships work. I believe we have a duty of care for every person we interact with, romantic or platonic. And you have a responsibility for the words that come out of your mouth and the behaviors. And if you know you are having a negative impact on other people or that they are holding out more hope than you are able to fulfill, it is on you to communicate that, be transparent and let the person know, because ultimately it's about respect, right? You wouldn't want someone else to do that to you, so don't do it to other people. And it's a really immature behavior that I think happens when we are a lot younger. Pretty much everyone I know has had an experience of a situationship when they were in their teens or early 20s. And as you get older, it is our responsibility to not only learn from that, but make sure it never happens again. And I do think once you are past a certain age, some of the situationships when you're younger is because you're learning how to communicate and you're messing up and you're not sure and you don't know how you feel and you have no experience. So you don't know if you actually do like a person. But past a certain age, I actually think it is quite intentional. And even when I look back on my one and only situationship, it was when I was 19 years old. We were seeing each other for about 6 months and we never went on a date. That sounds ridiculous, but that's the nature of situationships, right? We would text all day, every day. I would see him in clubs multiple times a week because I was in Bristol, and Bristol's quite a small place. So you did just bump into people. I would bump into him on the way back from the gym sometimes, and we'd go for a coffee. But when I say we never went on a date, we never went on a planned date. He never texted me and asked me out once. And yet in those 6 months, he would say things that sold me dreams he would never live up to, like really over romantic things. At one point, I remember me getting annoyed at him in a club because I was like, I don't get it. You ignore me most of the night. And then at the end of the night, when you can't find someone to get with, we go home together. I don't like how this is working. And in response, he said, Michelle, I love you. And I was like, so what? I was like, and then he was like, I really like you. And it was at that moment, I was like, this is not. And I was 19 years old and I did not know what to do. I was so confused. I didn't know whether he meant it. I don't know whether he retracted it because I didn't have the right response. But all of it was this thing of ultimately, if the guy liked me enough, we would have gone on a date. We wouldn't have relied upon chance meetings in the street, on the way back from the gym, in a club. He would have actually wanted to see me. And this is the thing we have to get down to, is why are we drawn to these situationships? Why do we stay in these situations knowing that we are getting hurt along the way? And I'm going to talk about that after the message of the week. This week's message is all about dating.
Hey Michelle, my name is Danelle and I have a question regarding dating and sexuality. Because I'm going on a first date with a girl this week. And I recently found out, like in the last year, I found out that I might be into girls and guys. Before I thought I was just like hetero. But how do I prevent overthinking and trying to draw conclusions and label myself with everything I think or feel? Because I have a quite big tendency. And how do I get out of my head and stop thinking about it and just live my life and date who I want to date? Because that's what I want to do. But I just keep thinking like, oh no, you gotta figure out what your sexuality is. And if you feel this, then you must be gay or you must be hetero. Yeah, so that's my question. But I'm also, with guys, I have a tendency to set very weak boundaries. And I noticed that with girls, it's very more smooth to me with setting boundaries. So how do I fix that and also be able to set boundaries with a guy and present myself as me and not as the person they want to see? I look forward to hearing from you. Thank you.
Thank you so much for the question. 2 questions, and I'm going to treat it like 2 separate questions because they need 2 separate answers. So first of all, in terms of your sexuality, I think you should be leading with curiosity. This is a word I use all the time, but it's because it's the only solution to taking the pressure off and not feeling like you need to know all the answers now. I understand we live in a world, especially within sexuality, where there are so many labels, and that can be really overwhelming. But on a personal basis, you actually don't need to know your label. You just need to know your experience and how you feel. And you can assess that after each date. And you're allowed to change your mind. I think this temptation to rush into labeling yourself means that you are putting yourself in a box. And I think the issue with labels is like, even just the term like bisexuality, for 2 people, that looks very different. That can be anything, like 2 plus size people, 2 fat people, 2 people with dyslexia. It doesn't mean anything about you being the same. There's a similarity between it, but I think often we see everyone who sits within the same box as being a monolith. And I think that's where it can get confusing when we're deciding our sexuality of, oh, maybe I sit in this box. Oh, but I'm not similar to that person who sits in this box. And it's because it can mean different things to different people. Words mean different things to different people. Even just on a very basic level, the word communication to two different people can mean two different things. And so, first of all, just forget all the labels for now. You can figure that out as you go. And to be honest, it's likely going to be the fact you wake up one day and be like, actually, this label feels right for me. But what I've noticed about the labels in my own life, and not necessarily sexuality, but like especially living as a public figure online, is labels are much more so for other people to understand you. Like when I am online, I walk through the world as a fat, scarred, mixed race woman. But at home, behind closed doors, I'm Michelle. And that's all it is and all that matters. All those labels is for everyone else to be able to categorize me and put me in a box. And so the reason why I'm saying that, and obviously it's in different contexts, you're talking about sexuality, is because I think this desire to want to put yourself in a box for everyone else to be able to understand it is often because you don't understand it yet. And that's okay. You're exploring, you're curious, and every person who has had a journey with their sexuality has had a phase where they've not had the answers and they're figuring it out. They figured out, like you have, that the box that we all got customized and grew up in of this very heteronormative society was like, wait, this doesn't fit. And now you're discovering what is right for you and what community is right for you and where you're sitting. And so when you're going on the date, in order to stop overthinking it, as you said, just see the person as a person in front of you, whether it's a man or a woman or someone non-binary. Just experience the date as you would any other date. That just because you're on a date with a woman, just because you're on a date with a man, doesn't mean you're necessarily going to let the person sat in front of you. Like, you can't go into every date thinking that's going to give you the answer to your sexualities, because it's also going to be the right person on the date. One way you can take pressure off is actually to be more transparent with the person you're dating. And that might not necessarily be talking within labels, but saying, oh yeah, I'm still exploring my sexuality. I'm not 100% sure. I don't have all the answers, but this is what I'm thinking. And then also updating the person as you go and being like, oh, I've actually discovered whatever you've discovered, and actually bring them along on the journey. And then the second part of your question of why you find it so much harder to set boundaries within your dating life with men is often the answer is look back at your caretakers. So if you look at your primary male role model growing up and your primary female role model growing up, the likelihood is that your primary male role model growing up, and that's the reason why I'm using those terms, is because it's not always a father and mother. For me, like, a lot of my primary female role models growing up were actually teachers, because I was in a boarding school. But the early ones really impact your relationship with men and women. And I don't love talking in gender binaries, but with this, it's often will give you a clue as to why you find it harder. And it's usually because the male caregiver in your life reacted badly when you set boundaries, or had worse boundaries with you, or was angrier when you set boundaries, and so you got more scared to set boundaries, or that with your male caregiver you had to perform a certain way, or that you only received love by being a certain person, whereas the female caregiver in your life was much more open to listening, open to hearing, and that's why you felt more comfortable. And then it then extends into adulthood, and you are able to have those different relationships because it's still going back to that wound. So in order to address it, you have to go back to your younger self, your childhood self, and speak to the child within you that almost is reminded of your relationship with your past caregivers when you're interacting with people in your dating life. And I do think, especially within your love life, it has the capacity to bring up more childhood wounds than in any other area. I think the depth of the connection within our love life tends to rattle us to a much deeper level and bring up memories. So if you are ever on a date and you're wanting to set boundaries and you find yourself hesitating, asking yourself the question, what does this remind me of, is a good way to start looking at how to change it and do it differently. But ultimately, if you are sensing a moment where you want to set boundaries with a man you are dating and you are finding it so much harder, setting that boundary anyway and showing yourself that person sat in front of you isn't that male caregiver, but also having a different experience where even if they don't react positively, they act differently, will remind you that you aren't a child anymore. You have more agency, you have more power, you have more control, and you are capable from walking away from a situation where when you were younger, you weren't able to because you were actually reliant on the people around you. I hope that helps, and thank you so much. So let's talk about why we stay in situationships. One of the main reasons we do is because of the intermittent reinforcement that takes place. So there are a number of studies that show this, of if you send someone a text and you always get a reply and you get an instant reply and you come to know that's the response you're going to get, you learn it as a response. What is much more destabilizing is if you don't know you're going to get a response in an hour, in 2 days, in 3 months, and that back and forth almost makes you, well, in research studies, press the lever more. So usually these studies are with rats and you press the lever and you get food. But if you only get food every 7 times or every 3 times or every 2 times you press the lever, then the rat presses the lever more. And so it's this very psychological thing that happens within situationships, of that unpredictability and uncertainty. But also when you have unpredictability and uncertainty, that's actually when your identity can change. And this is why it can be so corroding for your self-esteem to be in a situationship. Because if you know something to be true, you can't shake someone's frame of reference. So we learn this in life coaching, that in order to help someone have a new belief, you actually have to remove their old belief. But in order to remove their old belief, you actually have to destabilize that old belief. So let's say your old belief is you're ugly. I would try to destabilize it, obviously with positive intentions within a life coaching setting, of like, wait, but if you're ugly, then why were you a model for 10 years of your life? Why did people hire you? Like, I would use evidence to shatter that belief. I would be like, if you're ugly, then why have you had such a successful dating life? If you're ugly, then, and I would shatter that. And as I provide more evidence of why you being ugly is not true, that secureness of thought is shaken a little bit so that it's got cracks in it. So almost like some light can get in. And that's when I'll start implanting a positive belief, like that you're beautiful. And then I'll start providing evidence for why you're beautiful. But people can do this the opposite way. People can do this in a very destabilizing way, and whether that's gaslighting you or negging you, and so you're just in a moment of confusion, and then they can implant a new belief that you're not good enough, or that you're never going to find someone better than you. And I think this is where it's so important to talk about the self-esteem component, because ultimately we cling on to situationships because we hope that they are going to provide us the love that we are looking for, either within ourselves or from past caregivers that did not give us the love that we deserve. And ultimately, the attraction to people like that is often because that is likely to be familiar to the kind of love you had when you were younger. So if you grew up in a home where you weren't sure if you coming home with a good grade would either be ignored or celebrated, or that they'd completely disregard your good grade and start yelling because the dishwasher was packed wrongly, or so consumed with their own stuff that they would start yelling about something completely different, that's intermittent reinforcement too, but for a child. And so you not being able to rely on that solid, secure version of love means that you almost learn that's what love is. And that's what you seek it out in adulthood. And that's where we have to look at, what is it about me that maintains and continues these situationships? Because the thing we have to recognize is, if someone has healthy self-esteem and someone is confusing, it usually doesn't last more than 1 or 2 dates. The reason why it escalates to the stage of a situationship and actually being labeled as a situationship, of that level of uncertainty and confusion, and yeah, I don't know if we're dating or see each other or all of that, is because you are still doing the dance. Ultimately, in my 30s, even in my 20s, if someone wasn't giving me answers and clarity, it would end. The reason why yours is not ending is because there is a part of you that believes you can't find better out there, that you believe you deserve to be treated that way. And that might be a really hard pill to swallow, but you are staying in a situation which is going to cause you more harm, and you're going to then have to repair the damage that being around someone constantly reminding you that you aren't good enough, that you're not worth loving, that there are other people out there, will be a constant reminder of all of the pains and wounds of your past. And so there is no way that this person is ever going to become a source of comfort when you've built a precedent and a relationship off this instability and uncertainty. And I think what it comes down to is, if you are with a person who doesn't make you feel good, and that might be the low lows, but it also sometimes comes with these high highs, because the moment a situationship starts actually behaving properly, even if it's for a week or two before they revert back to their previous behavior, you get a huge high and huge relief around, oh my God, they're actually living up to the potential I thought this could be. I knew I was right. And then it's another crash back down to reality. But looking at the situation and being like, do I feel good right now? Does this make me feel good about myself? Is he treating me well? And then ending it. And I'm not saying ending it is easy. God knows I know how hard it is to end relationships or situationships or anything in the middle. But I know how hard it is, but it has to be worse staying in a situation like that. It has to be worse because there is no solution to it. You are going to be playing the same track over and over again until you've hurt yourself enough to learn. And I think I've used this analogy before in a previous podcast episode of like, you are touching the fire and then being shocked when you are burned. And you are expecting that one day the flame is going to be freezing cold, and it doesn't work that way. Like, the flame is always going to hurt, the learned reaction from interacting with that person. And you need to be the strong person to end it. I think sometimes we leave it in other people's court to decide whether they want us or not. But you get to decide if you want them. And you have to decide for yourself that you deserve to be treated better than that. Because ultimately, if you want to have any sort of self-esteem, you cannot be around people who treat you like crap. There's an amazing quote that says, before you diagnose yourself as depressed or with low self-esteem, just check you're not surrounded by assholes. And I truly believe that, especially in terms of your dating life, of you can't be dating people who are so reliant on you giving them more attention than they're willing to give you back, and be around people who are literally getting kicks off the fact that you are obsessed with them and they are not whatsoever interested in you. That if you're surrounding yourself with people like that, it is going to take a toll, and the damage that they are doing is going to take years to repair, that you would much rather be single. But ultimately, that's why you stay. There's a fear of being single there. There's a fear of being alone, of thinking that a single status means that you are unlovable. I understand looking at how to fix that and resolve that sounds really daunting and intimidating, but at least don't do anything to make it worse. And a situationship is making it worse. So even if you don't know the solution to having good self-esteem, or the solution to loving yourself, or knowing how you're going to be okay with being single, even when you can't find the solution, stop adding to your problems. And that's what the situationship is doing. So if you're listening to this and any of this kind of behavior sounds familiar to you, please, I'm begging you, end it. Because that person does not deserve to be in your life. And the only way you meet someone who you are more deserving of is if you have the space and capacity. And unfortunately, the thing with situationships is they consume more time in your mind than anything else. And while you're thinking about that guy who will never fulfill you non-stop, not guy, sometimes it could be a person, it could be women too. But if there is that person who you are thinking about non-stop, of course no one else new is going to enter, especially not someone new who actually deserves you, who will actually treat you well. And sometimes you learning self-esteem is you behaving that way before you believe it. So behave like a person who loves themselves. Treat yourself like a person who loves themselves. And a person who loves themselves would not be putting up with this shit. So it's time to end it. You deserve better. And until you believe that, I'm going to believe that for you. So get your ass in line, get rid of that situationship, and come on. You got to do better than this. There are better people out there. There are 8 billion people in this world. You can find someone who can actually reply to your messages, actually ask you out on dates, actually show up, actually do what they say they're going to do. And we need to get you to a point where you lose respect for people who are confusing and don't provide you the clarity that you need. So, as we do with every single episode, I'm going to end it with something I am learning right now. I am venturing back into dating. And the thing I'm opening myself up to is something more serious. I have been saying for the last 4 months. So I didn't date for about 6 months last year. And then for the last 4 months, I was saying like my goal was that in March, I want to be open-minded to the potential of something long-term and serious. It doesn't mean I'm actively seeking it out, but I want to be open-minded enough that if someone were to come across my plate with that as an offer or an option, I wanted to be emotionally in that place. So there are a few things I'm doing to get ready for that. And the reason why it's something I'm working on is I am still figuring it out. And I'm figuring out a few things, like things that usually happen after infidelity, like how to trust again, how to trust myself, that I will know the signs, and how to trust myself that there might not be any signs and I'm still capable and confident to end it if something comes out like what happened in my last relationship. But it's a lot of being open-minded, and it's a lot of putting myself out there and being open to the people I meet and what they are bringing to the table. And I haven't figured out a lot of it yet, but this is the journey I'm going on. And so I'll probably share more as I learn more, but that is the thing I'm working on right now. And I have no answers, which is also like, I used to get so scared of these phases in life when you had no answers. But what I realized is it does just open you up to potential, possibility, and there's a freedom in opportunities when you don't know what's going to happen next. So stay tuned. I'll keep you updated on any major life developments. And until then, I will see you next Tuesday for a brand new episode. If you enjoyed this one, leave us a review, give us a 5-star rating. And if you didn't enjoy it, don't worry about it. I'll see you next week.